в едином строю с советской армией, армией стран-участниц договора. Болгарская народная армия, Венгерская народная армия, Национальная народная армия ГДР.
Reculez, 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 vite, 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 reculez, reculez. Démerdez-vous, 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 reculez, reculez.
Но навсегда мы останемся солдатами славной советской армии. В любую минуту мы всегда готовы встать плечом к плечу на защиту нашего социалистического Отечества.
This video will not be one of considerable length, yet I feel this is still an important topic to discuss nonetheless, as it appears to be rather esoteric. This is because Soviet sources on the matter are lacking and English sources are almost non-existent. The information available in this video was compiled from a collection of unrelated manuals that contain loose references to urban combat doctrine, and two dedicated texts that speak to the subject in the post-reform era. Considering the urban sprawl of Europe, these tactics were indeed extremely important, and were defined by the experience of Soviet formations throughout the Second World War, which left the USSR with some very painful lessons to learn from.
Тебя, родная, есть почта полевая, прощай, труба зовет. Солдаты в поход, пусть враги запомнят, это негрозимо говорим. Мы прошли с тобой полсвета, если надо, повторим. Солдаты в путь, для тебя, родная, есть почта полевая, прощай, труба зовет. Солдаты в поход.
The organization and conduct of an offensive to capture a city or parts of a city are radically opposed to the means in which one conducts offensive maneuvers under normal conditions, and become increasingly unconventional if nuclear weapons have been employed prior to the battle's transpiration. In Soviet writing about this concept, nuclear munitions are generally seen as the most efficient means to achieve a decisive victory over forces defending a besieged settlement, and allow for the location to be immediately occupied in the shortest period of time with the least manpower employed to do so, as defensive structures and resources which could aid the enemy in repulsing an incursion would be ablated. This does not mean Soviet units would be without resistance in this hypothetical. Large zones of contamination, debris, and other factors would create a problem for advancing forces, though it must be noted that fighting within a city is generally regarded to be exponentially harder than preparing motorized rifles for fighting within a post-nuclear battlefield. Tactical nuclear weapons may be used on the outskirts of a city, where the flank of advancing forces could be exposed to the enemy, as well as the epicenter of the city to destroy reserves and units in depth. Before nuclear munitions are to be employed, it is extremely important that the city's administrative, military, political, and economic value be assessed, and that the attitude of its denizens to the Soviet military be determined. Within a conventional framework, cities become strongholds which require insurmountable resources to contest. Alongside the concern of commitment is the duration of fighting that is expected from such an endeavor, leading to a diminished offensive pace. If an occupied city must be attacked, it is important that units are positioned in such a way that varying axes of advance become possible. This will allow for a simultaneous offensive from multiple locations, diminishing the effectiveness of defending forces. Strong advanced detachments, often reinforced motorized infantry battalions, will be employed to locate gaps in the enemy's defenses within and deny reserves the ability to reinforce its interior. Important facilities and highways are to be immediately captured prior to all other elements. These advanced detachments will make great use of fire support from tube artillery and fixed-wing aircraft, and should be capable of capturing 2/4 of the settlement as the main body approaches. Air assault forces are to penetrate the rear of the enemy, which works to disrupt defending forces as the forward detachment arrives. They will primarily target routes leading to the city. If the advanced detachment is unusually successful, the main body will pursue the defenders as they retreat to ensure a lack of organized withdrawal. It is also possible that towns and cities along non-essential axes or lacking important administrative features will be bypassed and cut off. It is possible a two-flank bypass will be engaged to completely separate the city from enemy forces and starve out its occupants via encirclement. Anti-aircraft systems subordinate to the division or army involved in the operation will ensure that material is impossible to deliver through aircraft, which improves the speed in which the city may be captured. If the above options are impossible, direct contact with the enemy is necessary. In this circumstance, as described above, advanced detachments will cut off the settlement from multiple directions and work to seize important facilities on the outskirts of the city. Once the main body arrives, a simultaneous attack will transpire from several axes after a lengthy preparation by artillery and fixed-wing attacks. In a situation where surprise is required, this will not be done, and the attack will begin without warning. Motorized rifle battalions may advance into a city as the first or second echelon, may be held in reserve, may approach within the forward detachment, pursue retreating forces, integrate within a tactical airborne assault, or function as an assault detachment. The most difficult being first echelon operation on the primary axis of advance. Each battalion will cooperate with neighboring units to destroy forces occupying each approach. Battalions will break into assault groups targeting nodes or clusters of buildings and will make liberal use of air and artillery attacks. Battalions located on secondary axes work to prevent counterattacks directed towards the flank and rear of the main axis. If any of the secondary axes experience unexpected success, they may transition to become the main axis and receive additional support to maintain their momentum. A secondary echelon must be prepared at all times to bypass the settlement or reinforce the first. Battalions within the forward detachment are to avoid engaging in protracted fighting to seize important assets. They must act quickly and control them until the main body arrives. If these units are successful, they may hold the objective with a diminished force as they integrate with the main body and pursue its aims. Or, with permission from the senior commander, develop an offensive deep within the city. Battalions which have integrated with air assault forces are to destroy tactical nuclear deliverance systems, delay reinforcements, seize airfields on the outskirts of the city, and prevent the resupply of defending forces. Battalions dedicated to pursuit are rather important, as the enemy could easily break away from their established defensive and reoccupy the city elsewhere. These protocols, of course, depend largely on the scale of the front, the composition of the city in regards to its structures, the nature of the fortifications prepared against the offensive force on the outskirts and interior, and the degree in which the enemy may be suppressed. Conventional offensive operations outside of cities are often associated with a wide frontage. It is quite the contrary in regards to urban settings. Soviet manuals state that the estimated width of the average block is roughly 200 to 400 meters. This creates an extremely claustrophobic environment for a battalion, which must advance along parallel streets. It is expected that a front may stretch to 600 meters or more in width for this reason. Each company within a battalion will advance along a single street with a front between 200 to 300 meters, respectively. Each battalion involved within an offensive operation will be tasked with capturing and destroying personnel located within 1 to 2 blocks. They may also be assigned to the seizure of one structure. These objectives develop the offensive towards the actualization of overarching aims such as occupying the center of the city. Companies will work to achieve these goals by capturing singular structures or several small buildings along their route. As this is done, they advance with neighboring units in order to contest objects of importance within depth. Prior to the battalion's involvement in urban combat operations, they are likely to be reinforced and supported by an artillery unit, a tank company, and a company of combat engineers. Chemical troops may also see increased involvement due to their use of incendiary munitions, which may aid the attackers. Battalions which assume the role of assault forces will receive a greater allocation of engineers and artillery support. Subunits involved in street fighting are provided with additional anti-personnel and tank grenades, ammunition, means of smoke generation, and other devices which would assist in storming structures. Units for the disposal of ordnance and associated munitions are also to be provided with additional equipment. Each squad and platoon will receive their own attached engineers to complete their objectives, and in some cases, individual tanks. If the enemy is employing a tiered defensive with many overlapping echelons, it is important that a second echelon be established as opposed to battalion organizations centering around a single echelon. Within cities, the ability for each battalion and their assault groups to function independently and exercise a great deal of initiative is of utmost importance. Assault groups often consist of a platoon of motorized riflemen, several ATGMs or anti-tank guns, grenade launchers, a platoon of 120mm mortars, a platoon of tanks, 4 to 6 howitzers of varying calibers, 1 to 2 squads of engineers, and an attached chemical reconnaissance unit. These platoons may be of one of two types. Capture groups, which each consists of a motorized rifle platoon, reinforced with tanks, though they may also form entrenching units, which consists of a motorized rifle platoon, a battery of anti-tank guns, and an attached fire support group of grenade launchers and mortars. Demining groups may also be prepared, which include engineers and tanks equipped with mine rollers. It is not uncommon for an assault group to also operate a reserve consisting of 1 or more motorized rifle units, which may reinforce the first echelon and assist in entrenching. These reserves are usually constructed in such a way that they do not require the reassignment of attacking units to fulfill their orders. Motorized rifles are generally not as constrained by the need to maneuver their fire and assets in pursuit of the offensive, and as a result, they are the best choice for conducting urban warfare. They are more capable than their contemporaries when it comes to overcoming obstacles such as rubble, breaching settlements, and making use of roofs, basements, and underground passages. They can fight within buildings very effectively and entrench themselves within them just as easily, and therefore are advantageous for the repulsion of counterattacks. Of course, to achieve their objectives, they must integrate with other branches of the armed forces, which in turn provides them with tactical independence. One such unit, which is an important element in Soviet urban warfare when applied correctly in conjunction with previously discussed tactics, is the tank, which can provide unprecedented suppression in the form of direct fire against infantry. In conventional operations, the smallest armored subunit is the platoon, but in cities, individual tanks may be attached to platoons or squads as integrated elements. When tanks see use in confined spaces such as streets, they are to advance with infantry moving behind them, using the armor as mobile cover, in a wedge formation, providing mutual support. Tanks are to destroy structures which may house defending forces as they move throughout the city. Motorized riflemen are also to clear buildings and anti-tank mines as the formation develops to ablate anti-tank weapons seeing use against supporting armor. Generally speaking, if tanks engage armored targets and occupied dwellings while infantry engage anti-tank threats, the unit's tasks may be successfully completed, without unnecessarily endangering attached MBTs. Similarly to tanks, cities present unique complications for the conventional application of artillery, due to the presence of large, tall structures. Artillery must as a result see use in decentralized fashion. This is done through accompanying infantry and assisting in direct confrontation with the enemy. 2S1 is a likely candidate to fulfill this role. Howitzers are often positioned between houses, in squares, and large intersections. Artillery reconnaissance will maneuver with forward units and direct fires with support of command and observation posts. Individual fires are to be conducted in short, expedient fashion and will seek to successively destroy buildings, as well as fortifications. Mortars are to be placed on roofs and balconies to increase effectiveness in dense urban settlements. They will engage rear facilities, enemy manpower, and command posts. Higher caliber mortars are usually subordinate to the battalion commander. Engineers in urban operations serve to create passages for otherwise impassable rubble and prepare facilities within recently occupied structures to aid units on the offensive, which may take the form of command and control centers, field hospitals, warehouses, etc. Engineers may also install mines and demolish barriers and fortifications. Anti-aircraft systems will deny the enemy fixed-wing fire support, helicopter attacks, and material support. They may also suppress enemy infantry. These systems are often located atop buildings, in squares, gardens, and intersections. Aviation in support of urban operations is integrated at the request of the senior commander and his staff. Aircraft may perform a myriad of tasks, such as photographic reconnaissance to direct artillery or monitor the enemy's approach, or striking buildings, reserves, command posts, rear facilities, as well as nuclear deliverance systems. The job of the battalion commander and his associated staff depend on the conditions of the offensive operation, in regards to the nature of the enemy's prepared defenses, the method of capturing the city, the location of the city, and the terrain surrounding the settlement. Though it must be noted, in all circumstances, the organization of the offensive operation must be carried out in the shortest possible time. This is done before advancing to the line of contact, sometimes on the move. Organizing an offensive begins the moment the battalion commander receives the order to do so, from the regimental commander. He does this by calculating the time expected to complete his assigned task, elucidates the objectives of his deputies and unit commanders before preparing his units for the coming engagement. The battalion commander's decision-making is essential in the process of preparing for maneuvers within cities, as he outlines and determines where he believes his forces would be of the greatest effect in support of the regiment's offensive. In conditions where nuclear munitions have been employed, this is most frequently the enemy's main body, but in conventional engagements, the path of least resistance is favored. The role of the Chief of Staff when preparing for urban warfare is to organize reconnaissance actions and to obtain information on the composition of forces defending the outskirts of the city. On top of this, the Chief of Staff is also responsible for providing units with topographic maps, city plans, and organizational diagrams, oftentimes numerically denoting dwellings, and the deployment of reserves and reinforcements. It is not impossible that the Chief of Staff will assume control over organizing communication troops. Beneath both the battalion commander and the Chief of Staff are unit commanders, who oversee engineering equipment, as well as the replenishment of material, weapons, and manpower. Reconnaissance prior to the attack must locate several key elements, which will allow for an effective ingress into the city by advanced detachments. These include the location of artillery, mortars, anti-tank weapons, associated systems which could see use as direct fire weapons, mines, machine gun positions, and a myriad of miscellaneous threats. These reconnaissance operations are essential so that the fire support plan properly suppresses the enemy and demining units accomplish their tasks. Reconnaissance units are organized and assigned in advance so that they may provide information on the characteristics of enemy's defensive as it develops alongside the offensive operation. Battalions will work to establish observation posts. There may be 2 to 3 of these installations per battalion within the city as they advance to provide a constant stream of data to neighboring formations and commanders. Logistical assets and material to aid the offensive are to be stored underground, usually within basements to minimize their vulnerability to indirect fire. The same is applied to attached medical units, who are to be stationed in subterranean structures. Communication and organization between squads and companies becomes similarly decentralized due to absorption from buildings, reducing the range of shortwave radios. As a result, individual portable radios are to be used, as the mobility of IFVs and APCs equipped with larger radios is diminished significantly within cities. Unlike material support, signal troops are to establish communication nodes usually 300 meters from the battalion's first echelon, in attics and atop roofs, to overcome the dampening effects of urban infrastructure. Tanks may serve as command posts due to their more powerful radios. Having seized important facilities and strongholds, motorized riflemen advance along streets, making use of gardens, courtyards, breaches in walls, and underground passages. They methodically destroy any means of leveling resistance against attacking forces. Motorized riflemen are to occupy both sides of the street, pressing up against buildings. They are to fire into windows opposite of them. Tanks direct fire from cover to cover as this is done. When breaching buildings, its occupiers are to be destroyed via point-blank fire. Grenades will also see use with extreme consistency. Rooms will be successfully cleared until the structure is empty. Engineers open passages in walls and ceilings, if necessary. Once a building has been captured, the next structure is subject to similar tactics. Structures which are impossible to reliably siege will be set on fire or destroyed with ordnance. The second echelon is to inspect captured buildings and make sure any remaining enemies are dealt with. Mines are disabled, fires are extinguished, and special attention is paid to intersections, squares, public gardens, and exits to subterranean structures.
Стоим мы на посту, повзводно и поротно, бессмертный как огонь, спокойный как гранит. Мы армия страны, мы армия народа, великий подвиг наш история хранит. Не зря в судьбе аллеи знамя, не зря на нас надеется страна. Священные слова, Москва за нами, мы помним со времен Бородина. Священные слова, Москва за нами, мы помним со времен Бородина. За перелесками, за полустанками, за чертежами, за станками, за баранками еще не знали мы, еще не ведали, что мы в душе с тобой давно уж моряки. А служба службою везде, и на земле, и на воде, и друга верного рука с тобой в любой беде. А если очень повезет, тебя дорога приведет на славный Черноморский флот.